Those words didn't just sting, they cut deep, like a cold blade twisting into my chest. I stood there in the middle of the living room, gripping the arm of my worn recliner just to keep my balance. My son, Daniel, stood a few feet away, his face twisted in a mix of frustration and disappointment. No, it wasn't disappointment. It was contempt. "Dad," he said, shaking his head, you don't do anything anymore. You sit here all day, reading old newspapers, watching the same TV shows. You're not useful to anyone." My throat tightened. My mouth went dry. It wasn't the first time we'd had disagreements, but never had my own flesh and blood spoken to me like that. Not after the years I worked double shifts to put him through college. Not after I skipped meals so he could eat when money was tight. Not after I sold my tools, my pride and joy, to pay for his first car. "You think I'm useless?" I finally managed to say, my voice low but shaking. Daniel rolled his eyes. "I'm just saying it's time you stopped expecting everyone to take care of you. I've got my own life, Dad. My own responsibilities. You can't keep living off me." Living off him? He had no idea. Absolutely no idea how much I'd been covering for him behind the scenes. The bills I quietly paid when he was short on rent. The favors I pulled to keep him from losing his job last year. The sacrifices I made, invisible ones, because I didn't want him to feel like he owed me. I clenched my jaw, fighting the urge to yell. If I yelled, I'd lose him. If I stayed quiet, I'd lose myself. Instead, I simply said, "Go to your room, Daniel." He looked at me like I was a relic from another era, someone whose authority had expired decades ago. But he turned and left without another word, the sound of his footsteps heavy on the old wooden stairs. I sat there for hours after he was gone, staring at the faded family photos on the wall. There we were at the beach, his tiny hand gripping mine, his face lit with the kind of smile only children have, pure, trusting, full of belief that their parents are the strongest people in the world. When did that change? When did I stop being his hero and become a burden? As the hours dragged into the night, my anger simmered into something colder. Determination. If he thought I was useless, it was because I had allowed him to forget who I was, what I was capable of. I decided right then, tomorrow, I was going to remind him. The sun had barely risen when I was already dressed and standing in the garage. I hadn't been in there for months. Dust coated every surface, cobwebs stretched from the rafters, and the smell of oil and old wood filled the air. I walked to the back, where an old, weathered tarp covered something heavy. My hands trembled as I pulled it away. There it was. My old motorcycle, a 1978 Harley-Davidson Shovelhead. I'd restored it piece by piece in my younger days, riding it across states with nothing but a backpack in the open road. Daniel didn't even know it existed. It had been years since I last started it, but I was willing to bet it would roar to life if I gave it the attention it deserved. I spent the entire morning cleaning, tightening bolts, checking the spark plugs, and refilling fluids. By noon, my hands were black with grease, and my back ached, but my heart felt alive in a way it hadn't in years. When I finally turned the key and kicked the starter, the garage filled with the deep, guttural rumble of the engine. It was a sound that didn't just echo in my ears, it echoed in my bones. By late afternoon, Daniel came downstairs. He froze at the sight of me standing next to the Harley, helmet in hand. What is this?" he asked, his voice uncertain. "This," I said, "is me reminding you that I've lived a life before you were even born. That I've built things, fixed things, done things you can't even imagine." He smirked, almost mocking. "What, you're gonna ride off into the sunset to prove you're still young?" "No," I replied, strapping on the helmet. I'm going to prove I'm not finished yet. I kicked the starter again, the engine roaring like a wild animal. Daniel actually took a step back. I rode out of the driveway without looking back, the wind tearing at my jacket, my heart pounding with every mile. That night, I parked the Harley in the garage and went straight to my desk. I pulled out a folder Daniel didn't know I had, old letters, certificates, and photos from my years as a volunteer firefighter, my woodworking projects, even the blueprint for a small fishing boat I'd built from scratch decades ago. The next morning, I spread them across the kitchen table. When Daniel came down for breakfast, he stopped dead in his tracks. "What is all this?" he asked. "This," I said, "is my life. The things I've done. The people I've helped. The places I've been. You called me useless because you only see the man sitting in the recliner. But you don't know the man who carried his family through storms, who saved lives, who built more with his hands than most men ever will." He didn't say anything. Just stood there, staring. I could see a flicker of something in his eyes. Was it respect? Or shame? Maybe both. Daniel sat at the table, silent, his eyes darting over the scattered pieces of my past. His gaze lingered on a photograph of me in a soot-covered uniform, cradling a small child in my arms as smoke billowed in the background. "That was the Miller fire," I said quietly. "Their house caught in the middle of the night. I pulled that little girl out before the roof caved in. She was 3 years old. You were 4 at the time." Daniel didn't look up. His fingers brushed over the edge of the photo, tracing the charred frame. Next, he picked up a yellowed newspaper clipping, an article about a community fundraiser I organized after the factory layoffs. "You raised over $20,000, he asked. "I did," I nodded. "Not alone, but I led the charge. That money kept a lot of families fed through the winter." Piece by piece, he began to see that my life wasn't defined by the quiet evenings in a recliner he'd come to expect. It had been a life of movement, of action, of giving more than I had to give. Finally, he came to a letter, creased, water-stained, written in shaky handwriting. "Mr. Harris. My name is Laura. I don't know if you remember me, but you helped me the day I thought my life was over. You don't know the impact you had, but because of your kindness, I'm alive today. Thank you." Daniel read it twice. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. I didn't know," he said. "I didn't know any of this, Dad." I leaned back in my chair, my voice steady. "No, you didn't. Because I never asked for recognition. I never waved my achievements in your face. I believed a man's worth wasn't in what he boasted, but in what he quietly built." That afternoon, I told Daniel to get his jacket. "Where are we going?" he asked. "You'll see." We rode the Harley into town, the crisp air whipping past us. I could feel his grip tighten around my waist, a reminder of the boy who once clung to my hand, certain I could protect him from anything. We stopped at the community center, where a group of volunteers were unloading crates from a delivery truck. I nodded to an older man in a faded cap, who waved us over. "This is Tom," I said to Daniel. "We used to serve together. Today we're helping set up a meal drive for families in need. I thought maybe you'd like to lend a hand." Daniel hesitated, then slowly nodded. For the next 2 hours, we worked side by side, unpacking boxes, organizing canned goods, setting up tables. I watched him interact with the other volunteers, laughing at their jokes, listening to their stories. When the last box was stacked, Daniel pulled me aside. "Dad," he said, his voice low, "I'm sorry for what I said yesterday. I was wrong. I don't know, I thought you'd given up on life. But now I see, you just live it differently than I imagined. I looked at him for a long moment. I don't expect you to worship me, Daniel. I just expect you to remember that worth doesn't vanish with age. A man's value isn't in how fast he runs or how heavy he lifts, it's in the life he's lived and the lives he's touched. He swallowed hard, nodding. I understand that now. That night, as we sat on the porch, Daniel turned to me. Dad, would you teach me? Not just about the Harley or the firefighting stories, but about everything. The way you see life, the way you help people. I smiled. I'd be honored. From then on, things changed. We worked on small projects together, fixing furniture for neighbors, delivering meals, even restoring a second motorcycle we found in a junkyard. Each day, I could see the pride in his eyes grow, not just for me, but for himself. And in a quiet way, I realized the lesson wasn't just for him. It was for me, too. I wasn't done. My story wasn't over. So if you've ever been told you're useless, remember this: you carry decades of experiences, victories, and lessons that no one can take from you. Sometimes the people closest to you forget, until you remind them. And when you do, you don't just change how they see you, you change how they see the world.